At 10 p.m. on the 24th of September 1990, a six-wheel truck and a trailer carrying two large cylinders of liquid petroleum gas turned off the expressway into Petchbury Road. It was speeding and ran through a red light and then tried to swerve to avoid a car, causing the truck to fall on its side, right here. The heat from the blast was felt hundreds of metres away. The sound of the explosion was heard several miles away. For the traffic waiting at this intersection, there was no escape. People in their cars were burnt to a crisp, including the driver of the truck. A traffic cop who was on duty was turned into a pile of ashes, just his boots left standing attached to his feet in the middle of the road. Many of the injured were stripped completely naked, their clothes burnt from their skin. This whole area was an inferno. When the truck fell on its side and ground to a halt, it was right here outside the Pet Women's Dormitory where 30 women were staying. None of them survived the explosion, which tore through 15 shop houses, also destroying 100 homes behind in the Charon Rut slum community between the expressway and Petchbury Soy 37. The second gas tank couldn't take the heat and also exploded, causing a sea of fire which further ravaged the shop houses on both sides of the road. This spread up to a large advertising billboard which collapsed onto an electrical transformer, causing a power cut and a fireball that shot into the bright red sky. The fire continued to burn for almost 24 hours as rescue workers and firefighters tried to contain it with water, but it was difficult because the gas was dispersed into the air. The fire was finally put out at 10 p.m. the following night. The inferno destroyed 51 buildings altogether. All of the 38 shop houses on both sides of the street were completely gutted, as well as destroying 100 homes in the Charon Rut slum community. Damage was estimated at 214 million baht, around $6 million US.
ไฟมันแรงมากภาพที่เราเห็นเนี่ยคือเราไม่รู้นะว่ามันเกิดอะไรขึ้นจริงๆแล้วบางคนนี่นิ่งไปแล้วอะแต่เราไม่รู้ว่าเป็นผู้หญิงผู้ชายเสื้อผ้าก็ไม่มีเพราะว่าไฟมันลุกหมดอะมันท่วมตัวหมดอะบางคนเนี่ยวิ่งไปเนี่ยไฟนี่ติดตัวเลยนะตั้งแต่ขาตัวเขานี่ไฟลุกท่วมหมดแต่ก็ช่วยอะไรเขาไม่ได้เพราะเราเองเราก็ต้องเอาตัวเรารอดใช่ไหมแต่เป็นภาพที่แบบไม่เคยลืมนะเป็นภาพที่สดสยองมากเหมือนเราตกนรกอะฮะตกนรกทั้งเป็นเลย
The One topic that came up a few times when I was researching was the supernatural. Is this area haunted? Do the restless spirits of those who died that night still wander around here with nowhere to go? I think the supernaturally inclined or the superstitious would like to believe that's true. But as you know, everyone loves a good ghost story. There was a film that came out in 2001 called The Eye. And in that film, this lady has the ability to see the souls of the dead wandering around before they've actually died. And in the film, she's on a bus coming through here on that fateful night. And she starts to see the souls of the people who are about to die running away from the scene. Anyway, in that film, they recreated the disaster scene. So we're going to head to a place now that apparently has a supernatural connection to the events of that night, and it's at the very far end of Phetchaburi Soi 37. This is actually a cut through from Soi 37. It takes you out onto Nico Makasan Road, and further down you've got the entrance to the Bangkok Palace Hotel. Now the story is that after the initial cleanup of the disaster scene, the burnt out cars were stored under here for about a year, much to the horror of local residents, people who had businesses under here, and of course the hotel. They saw it as bad luck or bad karma because these were the cars that people had been burnt alive in. And the story today is that people try and avoid coming through here at night because apparently you can still hear the screams of the people who died that night trapped in their cars. Well, the Adriatic Hotel was built on the spot where many shop houses were destroyed that night, and this has led to stories and rumours as to whether the hotel could be haunted or cursed. They also say that any business built on land with this kind of history is never destined to be a success. Now I don't have access to the hotel's accounting records from when they opened, and nor did I read of any ghost sightings or poltergeists when I was going through their reviews, but I would say if this hotel hasn't been a success, I would put that down to location rather than anything supernatural. So I mentioned earlier about the dark cloud that had been hanging over the area since the accident. I did some more research and found a story that said that there was already a dark cloud hanging over the area before the accident, and this was the reason why it happened. There was a story about a Lee theatre that would set up and do shows in the area by the Charon Rut slum community, and this was just behind the shop houses where the Pet Women's Dormitory was. This Lee theatre was quite popular and made a lot of money. Now one night during a performance, the girlfriend of the theatre owner was watching and suddenly noticed the dancers on stage had no heads. She then heard a deep voice chanting very loudly, which took over her and she fainted. The show was stopped, and the next night a monk was invited to attend, but strange things continued to happen. Voices were heard from the actors' changing rooms and the sounds of crashing furniture. A spirit medium was called to perform an exorcism, but the medium refused to enter and said it would not be possible to exorcise the ghosts as there were too many spirits there who were looking to possess the actors and the local people to become their servant spirits. That night the theatre owner had a dream about the Lord of Death, who told him about his intentions, and in the dream he begged the Lord of Death for mercy and was spared. The next day the show was cancelled and the theatre moved away. 3 days later the gas truck crashed and exploded nearby. I'm going to give you a summary of the court case and you can decide for yourselves whether justice was served or not. And the information I'm going to give you is widely available on Google in various news articles. So we're going to start with the 20-year-old truck that caused the accident. This truck belonged to the Siam Gas Company, and according to the articles it was unlicensed, illegally modified, with no joints or straps to secure the gas tanks safely. On September the 26th, Siam Gas issued a statement saying the driver had been fired a month ago and had bought the truck from them and just hadn't yet removed their logo. The next day, the CEO of Siam Gas presented 2 million baht to help the injured and the families of the deceased. The cynical police general who was leading the investigation asked him if he had gifted the money out of guilt, but he replied that the assistance was given out of humanity. The police were determined to build their case and later that day issued a warrant to search the offices of Siam Gas, where they found a fuel payment order for the same amount of liquid petroleum gas, and also found that they had indeed supplied the truck. Tests on the driver's body showed the presence of alcohol and amphetamines in his bloodstream. In court, the CEO was sentenced to 5 years in prison and fined 20,000 baht. At a later appeal in 1994, this was reduced to a 2-year sentence, suspended for 3 years on the grounds that he wasn't personally responsible for the driver of the truck. The CEO, who was apparently one of Asia's richest men, said that he was happy not to be in prison and that he felt born again and would also become a monk for a while. He handed over almost $12 million in compensation to the victims and their families. A long time ago I lived further down Petchbury Road near to Ekamai, and I remember telling my friend about it when I moved there, and he said, "Which part of Petchbury Road?" And I told him and he said, "Oh, good, It's not the area where the disaster happened back in 1990. And he told me all about it, and that was the first I'd heard. And he said this area will forever have a dark cloud of doom and gloom hanging over it because of the events of that night. And people will always be unwilling to invest or buy land around here because it will never be successful because of the history. And there is a hint of that if you look around, because on one side of Peterborough Road you've got the failed Smile Square project. Now this was supposed to be a huge development of a condo, a hotel, a commercial complex with offices as well. Construction for that started in 2012 and then suddenly stopped in 2016 and has not restarted since. It's safe to say that the investors have not recouped their money for that. And then opposite that is the biggest expanse of land around here, and there is an old sign actually that says this land is property of the Tien Pha Foundation Hospital. So I suppose at some point around 30-40 years ago, I don't know how old the sign is, they intended to build a hospital in this spot but haven't got round to it. Now the grey building used to be in 1990 the headquarters of Channel 3 television, and that night they would have been caught right in the midst of all the chaos, unable to leave the building. And they filmed from their windows a lot of the tragic events as they took place. And now that building is part of the Wanit Place development, which was built and opened in the mid-1990s. And according to a local guy, he was telling me that that complex has never been fully occupied because of the history. Maybe in the future this area will end up being developed. They'll build the hospital and the Smile Square projects will maybe continue or get rebuilt into something else. But until that time, it will always be known as a bit of a wilderness along Peterborough Road.